The telegram arrived in Penelope Walker's trembling hands on an unseasonably warm Friday in April 1875, the bold black letters shattering her world with clinical efficiency. Services no longer required vacate school premises by Monday stop. Her small schoolroom in Yreka, California, had never felt so hollow as it did now, bathed in late afternoon sunlight that slanted through dusty windows. At 23, Penelope had devoted her young adult life to education, believing that knowledge was the great equalizer. That belief had led to her downfall. 2 weeks earlier, she'd begun teaching evening classes for the children of miners, laborers, and the handful of Chinese families who kept to themselves on the eastern edge of town. Children whose parents couldn't afford to lose small hands during daylight working hours. Children the town council preferred to see in the mines and laundries rather than learning their letters. Miss Walker, the voice of 8-year-old Lucy Chen, broke through her thoughts. The little girl stood in the doorway, her dark eyes worried beneath her neat braided hair. "Are you crying?" Penelope hastily wiped her cheeks. "Just a bit of dust, dear. Shouldn't you be heading home?" Lucy clutched her slate to her chest. "Pa says to thank you for the books. He's reading them to Ma every night." The simple statement pierced Penelope's heart. Mr. Chen had been attending her adult literacy class on Tuesday evenings, determined to improve his English. "You're very welcome. Now run along." She managed a smile until Lucy disappeared. Only then did she allow her shoulders to slump as she surveyed the classroom that would no longer be hers. A shadow darkened the doorway again. "Heard the news," came a deep, familiar voice. "Town's fools finally did it." Sheriff Daniel Miller leaned against the doorframe, his gray-streaked beard unable to hide his frown. At 50, he'd been one of the few allies on the town council, but evidently not influential enough. "They gave a reason at least?" Penelope asked, folding the telegram into smaller and smaller squares. "Official reason is budget constraints." The sheriff snorted. "Unofficial is that Harrison Blackwell doesn't want his mine workers' children getting ideas above their station, or their parents learning to read contracts." Penelope nodded grimly. Harrison Blackwell owned the largest silver mine in the area, half the businesses in town, and apparently the town council as well. "What will you do?" Sheriff Miller asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have some savings, perhaps Sacramento." "Shame to lose you, Miss Walker. You've done good work here." After the sheriff left, Penelope methodically packed her personal items, books, teaching materials, the small clock her father had given her before she'd left Boston 2 years ago. The framed diploma from the Massachusetts Teachers College felt like a mockery now. What good was educating yourself when using that education to help others was forbidden? The boarding house where Penelope rented a small room was quiet when she returned. Mrs. Jenkins, the proprietress, intercepted her in the hallway. "I received word, dear," she said, her lined face sympathetic. "You can stay through the month, of course." "Thank you, but I'll be gone by Monday." Pride stiffened Penelope's spine. "I won't stay where I'm not wanted." Later, lying on her narrow bed, Penelope stared at the ceiling, mentally cataloging her options. She had $47 saved, enough for a stagecoach ticket to Sacramento, and perhaps a week's lodging while she searched for a position. The thought of returning east in defeat was unbearable. Her parents had opposed her coming west, warning that frontier towns weren't ready for educated women with progressive ideas. She'd been determined to prove them wrong. Dawn found her with reddened eyes but renewed determination. She would leave Yreka, but she wouldn't abandon her calling. Somewhere, there would be a place that valued education for all. The stagecoach office was busy Saturday morning, miners and businessmen arranging travel or shipping goods. Penelope waited patiently in line, clutching her reticule with its precious savings. "Next Tuesday to Sacramento," the clerk told her, not looking up from his ledger. "$5.20. "I'll take it," she said, counting out the money. "Name, Penelope Walker." The clerk paused, finally looking at her. "The schoolteacher, former schoolteacher," she corrected. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Heard you were teaching the Chinese." Penelope straightened. "I was teaching anyone willing to learn." A murmur from behind made her aware that others in line were listening. She felt heat rise to her cheeks but refused to be shamed for doing what she believed right. "Tuesday morning, 6 o'clock, the clerk said curtly, handing her a ticket. As Penelope turned to leave, she found herself facing a tall man she'd never seen before. He stood with the casual confidence of someone completely at ease in his own skin, though he seemed distinctly out of place in the crowded office. His clothes were trail-worn faded denim pants, a blue cotton shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows, and scuffed leather boots. A wide-brimmed hat was pushed back on his head, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and keen hazel eyes that assessed her with unexpected intensity. "Pardon me," she murmured, stepping aside to let him pass. Instead of moving forward in line, he touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "Miss Walker, might I have a word when you're finished here?" Surprise kept her momentarily silent. The stranger didn't have the look of a parent, and she was certain she'd never seen him in Yreka before. "I'm finished," she said cautiously, "but I don't believe we've met, Mr. Austin Everly," he supplied, offering a calloused hand. "Recently arrived from Wyoming Territory. Perhaps we could speak outside." Curiosity overcame her natural caution. She followed him out onto the boardwalk, where the morning sun illuminated a face weathered by outdoor living but younger than she'd first thought, probably not much past 30. "What can I help you with, Mr. Everly?" she asked. "If you're looking for the school, I should tell you I'm no longer employed there." "I know. News travels fast in small towns." His voice had the slight drawl of someone from farther south, softening his consonants. "I understand you were dismissed for teaching those the town deemed unworthy of education." Penelope stiffened. "I taught children and adults who wanted to learn. Their worthiness was never in question." A smile touched his mouth briefly. "Well said, Miss Walker. I've just acquired a parcel of land about 3 miles outside town. Good grazing, water rights, and room to build. I came to Yreka looking for hands to help with the cattle drive coming in next month, but it seems I need a teacher too." "I don't understand." Austin Everly leaned against the hitching post. "I've got 15 men signed on already. Half have families they'll be bringing once we're established. That's a dozen children at least who'll need schooling. Plus, 3 of my cowboys can barely write their own names, which makes for interesting bookkeeping." His eyes held her steadily. "I'm offering you a position, Miss Walker, as the teacher at Everly Ranch." "There is no school at Everly Ranch," she pointed out, confused. "Not yet," he agreed easily. "But I've got good timber on my land and men who know how to use it. Say the word and we'll build one." Penelope stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "You want to build a school for me?" "For the children and the men," he corrected, though his eyes crinkled at the corners. "Though I reckon having a teacher with principles is important too." "Why would you do this? You don't know me." Austin straightened, his expression growing more serious. "I grew up unable to read until I was 15 when a traveling preacher's wife took the time to teach me. Changed everything. I believe education's a right, not a privilege for the wealthy." He shrugged as if embarrassed by the admission. "Besides, I need the help. Can't run a proper ranch without folks who can read contracts and calculate figures." Penelope's mind raced. The offer seemed providential, almost too perfect, yet there was something in his direct gaze that inspired trust. What would the position entail? And the compensation? She asked, practical considerations reasserting themselves. Room and board at the main house until proper accommodations can be built. $30 a month salary. 6 days of teaching. Hours negotiable to work around ranch duties for the men and children's chores. He named a figure that exceeded her previous salary by $10. Complete freedom to determine curriculum, with the understanding that practical skills are as important as book learning out here. And if the town council objects, a hardness entered his eyes. My land, my school, my business. Yreka's council has no say in it. Penelope hesitated. The opportunity was tempting, a chance to continue her work without abandoning the families who needed education most. Yet moving to a remote ranch with a man she'd just met carried obvious risks. You needn't decide immediately, Austin said, seeming to read her thoughts. I'm staying at the Silver Horse Inn for 2 more days. Sleep on it. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded paper. Here's the deed to my property if you want assurance I am who I claim. Their fingers brushed as she took the document, and she felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. Unfolded, the deed indeed showed the transfer of 320 acres to Austin Everly, dated just 3 weeks earlier. May I ask one question, Mr. Everly? Of course. Why me? You could hire any teacher passing through, or wait until your ranch is established. He studied her for a moment. Because any teacher who'd risk her position to educate those society overlooks is exactly the kind I want teaching the children in my care. He touched his hat again. Good day, Miss Walker. I hope to hear from you. She watched him stride down the street, his long legs covering ground efficiently. An intriguing man, this Austin Everly, with his unexpected offer that seemed to solve all her problems. Too good to be true, her rational mind warned. A second chance, her heart countered. Penelope spent the remainder of Saturday gathering information. The land office confirmed Austin Everly's purchase. The livery stable owner reported that Everly had indeed contracted for additional horses and equipment for a cattle operation. The general store had received a substantial order for supplies to be delivered to the Everly property. By Sunday afternoon, she'd made her decision. The stagecoach ticket lay abandoned on her dresser as she made her way to the Silver Horse Inn. The establishment was quiet, most of its weekend patrons having departed that morning. Austin Everly sat alone in the small dining room, papers spread before him as he made notes in a ledger. He looked up as she approached, and the smile that transformed his face sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. Miss Walker, he said, rising, please join me. She took the offered seat, folding her hands in her lap. I've come to accept your offer, Mr. Everly, with one condition. Name it. I'd like to continue teaching the children and adults from town who wish to learn those who were attending my evening classes. They could come to the ranch school. Austin leaned back, considering. How many? 7 children and 4 adults currently, perhaps more if word spreads. Distance might be a problem for some, he noted. 3 miles is a long walk after a day's work. I thought of that. Perhaps we could arrange transportation once or twice a week. A wagon that could bring them out and return them to town, he nodded slowly. Seems reasonable. We could use the supply wagon on evenings when it's not otherwise needed. A smile touched his mouth. Any other conditions, Miss Walker? A contract, she said firmly, stating the terms of my employment, my duties, and your obligations. This earned her a full smile. A woman who believes in getting things in writing. I approve. He pulled a blank sheet from his stack of papers. Let's draft it now, shall we? An hour later, they had created a detailed agreement that Penelope found satisfactory. Austin's fairness in the negotiations further reassured her that she was making the right decision. "When would you like me to start?" she asked as he signed the duplicate copy of their contract. "I'm returning to the property tomorrow to oversee construction of the main house." "You're welcome to join me then, though accommodations are primitive at present, just a cabin and bunkhouse." He hesitated. "Perhaps you'd prefer to wait a few weeks until things are more settled." "I can be ready tomorrow," Penelope said with more confidence than she felt. "I see no reason to delay." His eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Very well. I'll arrange for your belongings to be transported. Is 8 o'clock too early?" "8 is perfect." As she rose to leave, he asked, "What changed your mind, Miss Walker? Yesterday you seemed unconvinced." Penelope considered her answer carefully. "I believe in second chances, Mr. Everly, for my students, for myself, and for men of vision who understand the value of education." His expression softened. "Then we understand each other. Until tomorrow, Miss Walker." Monday morning dawned clear and cool. Penelope had packed her few possessions into 2 trunks and a carpet bag. Mrs. Jenkins embraced her at the door of the boarding house. "You're sure about this, dear? Moving to a stranger's ranch seems rather impulsive." "I've verified Mr. Everly's credentials," Penelope assured her, "and we've drawn up a proper contract of employment." "It's not your safety that concerns me most," the older woman said gently. "It's your reputation. An unmarried woman living at a bachelor's ranch will cause talk." "There will be families arriving soon," Penelope countered, "and my accommodations will be proper. Besides, I'd rather risk gossip than abandon my calling." Mrs. Jenkins sighed. "You always were stubborn. Well, if you find it unsuitable, your room will remain available for 2 weeks." "Thank you," Penelope said, touched by the gesture. At precisely 8, a wagon pulled up outside, Austin Everly himself handling the reins. He jumped down to assist with her luggage, his movements efficient and strong. "Ready for your new adventure, Miss Walker?" he asked, offering his hand to help her up to the seat. "I am indeed, Mr. Everly." As they pulled away, Penelope felt the weight of curious eyes following their departure. Word of her new position had spread quickly. She kept her back straight and her gaze forward, determined not to show any doubt. The journey took nearly an hour, the wagon leaving the main road to follow a less traveled trail that wound through pine forest before opening onto rolling grassland. In the distance, snow-capped mountains provided a dramatic backdrop to the landscape. "It's beautiful," Penelope said, genuinely impressed. "It will be," Austin agreed, gesturing toward a clearing where several men were at work. "That's the main house site. The bunkhouse is just beyond those trees, and the original cabin is by the creek." As they drew closer, Penelope could see the framework of what would become a substantial house. Men moved about with purpose, sawing lumber and hammering beams into place. Several called greetings to Austin as the wagon approached. "Where will the school be?" she asked. Austin pointed to a level area about 100 yards from the main house. "I thought there, close enough to be convenient but separate enough to minimize distractions." He glanced at her. "Unless you'd prefer a different location." "No, that seems ideal. Good light and the proximity to the house will be practical in winter." He nodded, pleased. "The cabin is yours until the house is complete. It's small but sound. I've been using it, but I'll move to the bunkhouse." "I can't displace you from your home," she protested. "You're not," he assured her. "I'd planned to move to the main house once it's built anyway. The cabin will eventually serve as a guest house or perhaps additional accommodations for a foreman." Austin drew the wagon to a halt near a sturdy log cabin nestled beneath towering pines. It was indeed small, a single room with a covered porch but well constructed, with glass windows and a stone chimney. "Let me show you," he said, helping her down. Inside, Penelope found a space that was simple but comfortable. A cast iron stove occupied one corner, a narrow bed another. A rough-hewn table with 2 chairs sat beneath a window, while a bookshelf held a surprising number of volumes. "You're a reader," she observed, scanning the titles that ranged from practical manuals on animal husbandry to poetry and philosophy. "When time allows," he replied, watching her examine the space. "Will it suit you?" "It's perfect," she said sincerely. "Though I'll need a place to teach until the schoolhouse is built. The bunkhouse has a common area we can use temporarily. Most of the men are out working during daylight hours." As Austin brought in her trunks, a lean, weathered man approached from the direction of the construction site. "Miss Walker, this is Caleb Turner, my foreman and right hand," Austin introduced them. "Caleb, Miss Penelope Walker, our new teacher." "Madam," Turner said with a respectful nod, "heard you ran into trouble in town for teaching the wrong sort." "I taught anyone willing to learn, Mr. Turner," she replied evenly. A slow smile spread across the foreman's face. "Then you'll fit right in here. The boss doesn't much care for arbitrary rules either." He turned to Austin. "The lumber for the school arrived. Figured we'd get the house roof on first, then start on the school next week." "Sounds right," Austin agreed. "Any word from Peterson about those cattle?" "Telegram came this morning. They're on schedule, due to arrive end of May." As the men discussed business, Penelope began unpacking her belongings, arranging her clothes in the small trunk at the foot of the bed and her books on the shelf. It felt strangely intimate to intersperse her volumes with Austin's, as if they were already sharing more than just employment. The thought unsettled her. She'd come here for a professional purpose, not to develop personal attachments. Yet something about Austin Everly's direct manner and evident respect for her work made it difficult to maintain the formal distance she'd cultivated with most men. Over the next week, Penelope established a routine. Mornings were spent organizing her teaching materials and developing a curriculum suitable for the varied ages and abilities of her prospective students. Afternoons, she conducted lessons for the 3 ranch hands. Austin had mentioned men in their 20s and 30s who approached learning with determined, if sometimes frustrated, effort. "Never thought I'd be back in school at 32, admitted Frank Doyle, a stocky cowhand with calloused hands that struggled to hold a pencil. "But the boss says a man who can read his own contracts is less likely to be cheated." "He's right," Penelope agreed. "And you're making excellent progress." In the evenings, she often found herself sharing meals with Austin, who seemed genuinely interested in her teaching methods and educational philosophy. Their conversations frequently extended past dinner, covering topics from literature to politics to their respective backgrounds. She learned he'd grown up in Tennessee, the son of a tenant farmer who died young, leaving Austin to support his mother and sisters from the age of 14. He'd worked his way west, starting as a cattle drover and gradually saving enough to buy his own small herd. A fortunate investment in a Wyoming silver mine had provided the capital to purchase the California property and expand his operation. "Why here?" she asked one evening as they sat on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold. "Why not stay in Wyoming where you were established?" Austin was silent a moment, rolling a cigarette with practiced ease. "Wyoming was getting crowded," he said finally. "Too many big operations pushing out the smaller ranchers. And the winters." He shook his head. "Lost nearly a third of my herd in '73 to blizzards. California offered better weather, year-round grazing, and access to markets in San Francisco. He lit his cigarette, the match briefly illuminating his features. "What about you? Boston to Yreka is quite a journey for a young woman alone." Penelope smiled faintly. "Adventure, I suppose, and purpose. Eastern schools are well established with plenty of qualified teachers. Out west, education is still a frontier of its own." She hesitated. "And perhaps I was running from something too." "What's that?" "Expectations. In Boston, a woman my age is expected to be married with children, not pursuing a career. My parents were supportive of my education, but less enthusiastic about my decision to teach rather than settle down." Austin studied her in the fading light. "Do you regret it, coming west?" "Not for a moment," she said with certainty, "even with the challenges." He nodded, seeming to understand what she left unsaid, that the freedom to define herself by her work rather than her marital status was worth the sacrifices she'd made. As April turned to May, the ranch transformed with remarkable speed. The main house took shape, a sturdy two-story structure with multiple bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a formal dining room. The promised schoolhouse began to rise, as well, a simple but well-designed single-room building with large windows and a small bell tower. True to his word, Austin arranged for the supply wagon to bring Penelope's former students from town every Wednesday and Saturday. The first time the wagon returned with 5 children and 3 adults, including Mr. Chen and his daughter Lucy, Penelope felt a surge of vindication that nearly brought tears to her eyes. "You've made them welcome," she told Austin that evening, "despite the risk of offending the town." He shrugged, but she could tell he was pleased by her approval. "I need good relations with Yreka for supplies and shipping, but I won't let anyone dictate who can learn on my land." His expression hardened slightly. "Harrison Blackwell sent a man out yesterday to express concerns about our school. I sent him back with a clear message about where Blackwell could place those concerns." Penelope laughed despite herself. "You'll make an enemy of the most powerful man in the county." "Wouldn't be the first time I've crossed a man who thinks money equals authority." Austin's eyes held hers. "Some things are worth fighting for." The intensity of his gaze stirred something in Penelope that she'd been trying to ignore, an awareness of him not just as her employer but as a man. A handsome, principled man whose company she'd grown to enjoy more than was strictly professional. In late May, as promised, the cattle arrived, 300 head of sturdy Herefords driven by a crew of 10 cowboys who would join Austin's permanent staff. With them came the first families. 2 married cowboys with wives and children who would live in newly constructed cabins near the main house. The schoolhouse was completed just in time, a source of evident pride for Austin, who personally installed the school bell and built the teacher's desk. "What do you think?" he asked as he showed Penelope the finished building the day before classes were to begin officially. She turned slowly in the center of the room, taking in the smooth plank floors, the row of windows that would fill the space with light, the neat desks arranged in rows. A lump formed in her throat. "It's perfect," she said softly. "Better than the schoolroom in town." "Still needs books," he noted. "I've ordered some from San Francisco, but they won't arrive for another few weeks. We'll manage with what I have until then." She ran her hand along the smooth surface of her desk. "You built this yourself?" Wanted to get it right. There was something in his voice that made her look up sharply. Austin stood watching her with an expression that sent warmth spreading through her chest. "You deserve a proper place to teach, Penelope." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it hung in the air between them. For a moment, she thought he might step closer, might bridge the gap that had remained carefully maintained despite their growing friendship. Instead, he cleared his throat and moved toward the door. I should check on the new hands. They're still settling in. Of course, she said, ignoring the faint pang of disappointment. Thank you again, Austin, for everything. He paused in the doorway, hat in hand. You're making this place more than just a ranch, you know. You're making it a community. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Penelope alone in the schoolhouse with thoughts that had no place in a teacher's mind, thoughts of what it might be like if their relationship extended beyond employer and employee. The grand opening of Everly Ranch School took place on the first Monday in June. 19 students enrolled the 7 children now living on the ranch, plus 12 from town who would attend on a modified schedule. The adult classes would continue in the evenings, with 8 ranch hands and 5 townspeople committed to attendance. Austin insisted on a proper celebration, with a picnic lunch for all and a speech that surprised Penelope with its eloquence. Education isn't just about books and figures, he told the assembled families, standing on the schoolhouse steps. It's about possibility. Every person who learns to read, write, and calculate has tools that can never be taken away. Tools that open doors and protect against those who would take advantage of ignorance. He smiled at the attentive faces. Miss Walker has agreed to provide those tools to anyone willing to work for them. All I've done is provide the space. 3 cheers for Mr. Everly and Miss Walker. Called Frank Doyle, who had progressed to reading simple texts with growing confidence. The response was enthusiastic, even from those who had initially been skeptical about the value of schooling. Penelope felt a swell of emotion as she looked at the faces of her students, young and old, from varied backgrounds, all united by the desire to learn. Later, as the celebration wound down, she found herself walking beside Austin along the creek that bordered the eastern edge of the property. "You're good at speeches," she observed. "Ever considered politics?" he laughed. "Lord, no. I prefer honest work to glad-handing and making promises I can't keep." "You keep your promises," she said quietly. "Everything you said you'd do, you've done." Austin stopped walking, turning to face her. The afternoon sun caught in his hair, highlighting the gold among the brown. "Not everything," he said, his voice dropping lower. "There's one thing I've wanted to do since about 3 days after meeting you, but I haven't found the courage." Penelope's heart quickened. "What's that?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of green in his hazel eyes. "This," he said, and gently cupped her face in his hands. The kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. When she didn't pull away, it deepened, his mouth warm and certain against hers. Penelope found herself responding with a fervor that should have embarrassed her, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they finally separated, Austin kept his hands framing her face, his expression a mix of wonder and concern. "I hope I haven't overstepped." "You haven't," she assured him, slightly breathless. "Though this certainly complicates our professional arrangement." A smile tugged at his mouth. "I've never been one for simplicity." He grew more serious. "I admire you, Penelope. Your conviction, your courage, your compassion for those others overlook. I don't want to jeopardize your position here or your reputation, but I can't pretend my feelings are merely those of an employer." "Nor can I pretend mine are just those of an employee," she admitted. "But there will be talk." "More than there already is." "Let them talk," he said with a shrug. "We know the truth of who we are and what we're building here." He took her hands in his. "I'm not asking for promises, just permission to court you properly if you're willing." Penelope considered his offer. The sensible path would be to maintain professional distance, to focus on establishing her school without the complications of romantic entanglement. Yet hadn't she come west precisely to escape convention, to forge her own path? "I'd like that," she said finally. though we should be discreet for the sake of the school." His smile was like sunrise. "Agreed. We'll take it slowly." He raised her hand to his lips. "Now, shall we return to the celebration before your students send a search party?" The following weeks established a new rhythm to life at Everly Ranch. Penelope taught during the days, alternating between the ranch children and those from town. Evenings were often spent with Austin, sometimes in the company of others, sometimes in private conversations that ranged from lighthearted to profound. Their courtship progressed with deliberate care. Austin was respectful of her position and reputation, never presuming or pushing for more than she was ready to give. They shared meals, walks along the creek, and occasional rides to explore the expansive property. Each interaction deepened Penelope's appreciation for the man behind the confident rancher, his humor, his intelligence, his unwavering sense of justice. Word of their relationship inevitably spread, generating predictable gossip in Yreka. Some parents threatened to withdraw their children from the school, but when faced with the alternative, no education at all for many, the threats remained just that. As summer progressed, the ranch flourished. The main house was completed in July, a comfortable blend of practical functionality and unexpected touches of elegance. Austin insisted Penelope take one of the upstairs bedrooms, moving her from the cabin with the explanation that the schoolteacher deserved proper accommodations. "Besides," he added with a wink, "it silences some of the gossip if you're under the same roof as Mrs. Simmons." The housekeeper, a formidable widow from Sacramento, served as both cook and unofficial chaperone, her presence lending an air of propriety to the household. By August, the first harvest from the kitchen garden was coming in. Cattle were fattening on the rich summer grass, and Penelope's school had grown to 27 regular students. The books Austin had ordered from San Francisco arrived, crates of them, far more than she had requested. "I might have gotten carried away," he admitted as they unpacked volumes of history, science, mathematics, and literature. "But a proper school needs a proper library." Penelope lifted out a beautifully bound copy of Shakespeare's collected works. "This must have cost a fortune." "Good investment," he said simply. "Education always is." It was moments like these that strengthened her growing conviction that Austin Everly was unlike any man she'd ever known, generous without seeking credit, principled without self-righteousness, and respectful of her calling in a way few men of their acquaintance seemed to understand. In September, as the aspens began turning gold on the mountainsides, Austin proposed a trip to San Francisco. "The cattle drive leaves next week," he explained over dinner. "I need to go along to handle the sales, and I thought you might enjoy seeing the city. Mrs. Simmons would accompany us, of course, and we'd stay at separate hotels." "I'd love to," Penelope agreed, excitement bubbling up at the prospect of visiting the famed city. "The school can manage without me for a week. Lucy Chen has progressed remarkably. She could help the younger children with their lessons." The journey took 3 days by stagecoach, the landscape transforming from mountain forest to rolling hills to the dramatic coastline. San Francisco itself was a revelation, bustling, cosmopolitan, with a vibrant energy that reminded Penelope of Boston while remaining distinctly Western in character. While Austin conducted his business, Penelope explored the city with Mrs. Simmons as her companion. They visited bookshops, attended a concert, and toured the impressive buildings rising from the hills overlooking the bay. On their final evening, Austin took them to dinner at one of the city's finest restaurants, the three of them dressed in their best clothes. Afterward, Mrs. Simmons claimed fatigue and returned to their hotel, leaving Penelope and Austin to stroll along the waterfront in the cool evening air. "I've been thinking," Austin said as they watched ships' lights bobbing in the harbor, "about the future. What about it?" He seemed uncharacteristically nervous, his hands fidgeting with his hat. "The ranch is taking shape nicely. The cattle sold well. The school is thriving." He took a deep breath. "But something's missing." Penelope's heart skipped. "Oh," Austin turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "A partnership. A true one, not just in work but in life." His eyes held hers steadily. "I love you, Penelope Walker. Your intelligence, your compassion, your unwavering dedication to what's right. I can't imagine building a future without you beside me, not just as my employee or even my sweetheart, but as my wife." Though she'd sensed the conversation was heading in this direction, the actual words still took her breath away. "Austin, I know it's fast," he continued quickly. "We've known each other less than 6 months, and I know marriage would change things for you professionally. I want you to understand that I'd never ask you to give up teaching. The school is yours, whether you're Miss Walker or Mrs. Everly." Penelope found herself smiling at his earnestness. "You've given this considerable thought." "I have," he admitted. "Wanted to make sure I had answers for any concerns you might raise." She stepped closer, emboldened by his declaration. "And if I said yes, what then?" Hope brightened his expression. "Then we'd be married here in San Francisco or back home, whichever you prefer. We'd continue building the ranch and the school together. And perhaps someday, if you wanted, we might have children of our own to educate alongside the others." The picture he painted was appealing, a life of purpose and passion, shared with a man who supported her calling rather than asking her to abandon it. Yet practical considerations remained. "The school board in Yreka dismissed me partly because I was too progressive," she reminded him. "If I marry you, some parents might object to their children being taught by a married woman with unconventional ideas." Austin's expression hardened slightly. "Anyone who'd deny their child an education based on the teacher's marital status isn't thinking of their child's best interests. Besides," he added with a hint of his usual confidence, "Everly Ranch School doesn't answer to Yreka's board. It answers to us. The word held such promise, such potential." "In that case, Mr. Everly," she said, stepping into the circle of his arms, "my answer is yes." Their engagement was announced upon their return to the ranch, generating reactions that ranged from enthusiastic approval to predictable disapproval from certain quarters in town. Harrison Blackwell, still smarting from Austin's refusal to bow to his influence, used his newspaper to publish a thinly veiled editorial questioning the propriety of the arrangement. "Ignore it," Austin advised when Penelope showed him the paper. "Blackwell's just angry that we're providing education he can't control." "It's not just him," she pointed out. "Reverend Thomas refused to perform the ceremony." Austin shrugged. "Then we'll ask Pastor Miller from the Methodist Circuit. He'll be through in November anyway." His calm confidence was reassuring, helping Penelope weather the storm of gossip with grace. She continued teaching, finding that most of her students and their parents cared far more about her abilities as an educator than her personal life. The wedding took place on a crisp November day, with fall colors painting the landscape in russet and gold. Pastor Miller, a jovial man with progressive views, performed the ceremony in the schoolhouse, which had been decorated with pine boughs and late-blooming wildflowers. Penelope wore a gown of deep blue silk that Austin had ordered from San Francisco, with a simple veil anchored by a comb that had belonged to her mother. Austin looked uncommonly formal in a new black suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. The entire ranch turned out for the celebration, along with those townspeople brave enough to defy Blackwell's disapproval. Sheriff Miller came, bringing a finely crafted clock as a wedding gift. Mr. Chen and his family attended, presenting the couple with an exquisite embroidered wall hanging that would later take pride of place in their home. Even Mrs. Jenkins made the journey from Yreka, embracing Penelope with tears in her eyes. "I was wrong to worry," she admitted. "You found your place after all." The celebration continued well into the evening, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice their number. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit around the yard, creating pools of golden light where couples swayed to fiddle music. Austin led Penelope in a waltz, his hand warm against the small of her back. "Happy Mrs. Everleigh," he murmured. The name still felt new but not unwelcome. "Very," she assured him. "Though I think I'll remain Miss Walker in the classroom. Less confusing for the students," he chuckled. "Whatever you prefer." His expression softened. "I still can't quite believe you said yes." "Because I'm giving up my independence," she teased. "Because you had other options," he corrected her. "You could have gone to Sacramento or San Francisco, built a career in a proper city school." Penelope rested her head against his shoulder, breathing in the now familiar scent of him clean cotton, leather, and the faint spice of his shaving soap. "None of those places needed me the way this one does." She looked up at him. "The way you do." His kiss was gentle, mindful of their audience yet still conveying the depth of his feelings. "I'll spend my life making sure you never regret that choice." Later that night, in the privacy of the master bedroom that was now theirs, Penelope discovered the physical expression of the connection they'd been building for months. Austin's touch was reverent yet passionate, his patience allowing her initial nervousness to dissolve into pleasure that surprised her with its intensity. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms with her head on his chest, she felt a profound sense of rightness, as if all the pieces of her life had finally aligned in a pattern she hadn't known she was seeking. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. His arms tightened around her. "And I you, more than I have words to express." "You express it well enough," she assured him, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "In everything you do." Winter brought changes to the ranch routine. Cattle were moved to sheltered pastures, building projects slowed, and the school adjusted its schedule to accommodate shorter days and occasional storms. Penelope continued teaching, finding that marriage had changed her status in the community without diminishing her authority in the classroom. Christmas was celebrated with particular enthusiasm, the main house filling with greenery and the sense of Mrs. Simmons baking. Austin insisted on gifts for everyone on the ranch, with special attention to the children, many of whom had never experienced such generosity. "You spoil them," Penelope observed as they watched the youngsters exclaim over new books, slates, and small toys. "They deserve some spoiling," he replied, his arm around her waist. "As do you." His gift to her was a leather-bound journal with her initials stamped in gold on the cover. "For your thoughts, theories, or perhaps the book on education I know you'll write someday," he explained. Hers to him was a fountain pen of polished ebony, paired with a desk set for his office. "For all those contracts and letters you're finally able to read and write yourself," she said with a smile. As winter deepened, Penelope began experiencing morning sickness, a development that both thrilled and terrified her. When the doctor from Yreka confirmed her pregnancy, estimating the baby would arrive in late July, Austin's reaction was one of pure joy. "A child," he said in wonder, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our child." Despite his excitement, he was adamant that Penelope should make her own decisions about continuing to teach. "Do what feels right for you," he insisted. We'll arrange whatever help you need." Touched by his support, Penelope chose to continue teaching through the spring term, planning to take the summer to prepare for the baby's arrival. Her students were surprisingly accepting of the news, though it necessitated some delicate explanations for the younger children. Spring brought new growth to the ranch, calves in the pastures, fresh plantings in the expanded gardens, and 2 new families joining the community as Austin's operation continued to flourish. The school enrollment reached 35, necessitating the addition of an assistant teacher, a young woman from Sacramento whom Penelope carefully trained in her methods. As Penelope's pregnancy progressed, her energy occasionally flagged, but her commitment never wavered. Austin would sometimes find her asleep at her desk, lesson plans half completed beneath her cheek, and carry her to bed with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "You're working too hard," he would chide gently. "So are you," she would counter, noting the long hours he put in as the ranch expanded. "Different kind of work," he'd argue. "You're growing a person while educating dozens more." Their good-natured debates continued throughout her pregnancy, a reflection of the partnership they'd built, equal in respect if different in responsibilities, with room for both to pursue their passions while supporting each other's dreams. In July, as predicted, their son arrived after a difficult but ultimately successful labor. They named him William James Everly William for Penelope's father and James for the teacher who had taught Austin to read. "He has your eyes," Austin said in awe, cradling the infant with hands that seemed suddenly too large and rough for such a delicate task. "And your chin," Penelope observed, exhausted but radiant. "Stubborn already." The baby's arrival coincided with the completion of a new wing on the schoolhouse, 2 additional classrooms, and a small library, funded by the profits from a successful cattle sale. Austin had insisted on the expansion despite the cost, recognizing that the school had become as central to the ranch's identity as the cattle operation itself. "An investment in the future," he called it, echoing his words from their early days together. As summer faded into fall, Penelope gradually resumed teaching, bringing William with her most days. The older students took turns holding him during their study periods, and Austin frequently appeared at midday to check on both his wife and son. One crisp October afternoon, nearly 18 months after their first meeting, Penelope stood on the schoolhouse steps watching her students file out after the day's lessons. William dozed in a basket beside her desk, his dark lashes forming perfect crescents against his plump cheeks. Austin approached from the direction of the main house, his stride as purposeful as ever despite the long day he'd already put in. He paused to speak with several of the children, asking about their studies with genuine interest. When the last student had departed, he climbed the steps to join her, kissing her cheek in greeting. "Productive day. Very. Lucy Chen has finished all the advanced arithmetic exercises. I'm thinking of having her help teach the younger children next term." Austin nodded approvingly. "She has a gift for explanation. Her father mentioned she's been helping him with the account books at their store." They moved inside, where William stirred at the sound of his father's voice. Austin scooped him up with practiced ease, settling the baby against his shoulder. "I had a letter from Harrison Blackwell today," he said as they gathered Penelope's materials. "Seems he's reconsidered his position on education for the working families. He's proposing a new school in Yreka, open to all children regardless of background." Penelope looked up sharply. "After all his opposition to what we're doing here, what prompted this change of heart?" Austin's smile held a touch of satisfaction. "Apparently, his son was injured in a mining accident last month." One of our students, Miguel Sanchez, was working nearby and knew enough about first aid from those health lessons you gave to stop the bleeding and likely save the boy's life. He bounced William gently as the baby began to fuss. Blackwell may be a hard man, but he loves his son. Seems he's had something of an awakening about the value of education for all. That's remarkable, Penelope said, genuinely surprised, though I'm sorry it took such a frightening incident to change his mind. Sometimes that's what it takes. Austin transferred William to her arms. He's asked if you would consider advising on the curriculum for this new school. As a consultant with appropriate compensation. Penelope stared at him. Me, the woman he tried to run out of town. The same, Austin confirmed with a chuckle. I told him I'd pass along the request, but that your schedule was quite full between teaching, motherhood, and helping run a growing ranch. She considered the offer as they walked toward home, William now awake and gazing with bright interest at the world around him. I might be willing to help, she said finally, if it means more children will have access to education. Austin's arm slipped around her waist. I thought you might say that. It's one of the many reasons I love you. They paused at the crest of the gentle hill that separated the school from the main house. Below them, Everly Ranch spread in a picturesque tableau, the sturdy main house with smoke curling from its chimneys. The bunkhouse where several cowboys were visible relaxing after their day's work. The newer cabins where families had established their homes, and pastures where cattle grazed contentedly. Did you ever imagine this? Penelope asked, gesturing to the thriving community they'd built. When you purchased the land? Austin was quiet for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. I imagined a good ranch, he said finally. A place that could sustain itself and provide a decent living. Maybe even a legacy to pass on someday. He looked down at William, then at Penelope. But this you, our son, the school, the families who have joined us, this exceeds anything I could have dreamed. As they resumed walking, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The dismissal from her position in Yreka had seemed a devastating setback, closing a door she'd worked hard to open. Instead, it had led her to a wider path, one with challenges, certainly, but also with rewards beyond anything her younger self could have envisioned. What are you thinking? Austin asked, noting her pensive expression. That sometimes life's greatest disappointments lead to its greatest joys, she replied, shifting William to her other arm. If I hadn't been fired for teaching the poor, you would never have built me a schoolhouse on your land. And if you hadn't been brave enough to accept my offer, I'd still be a rancher with land and cattle but an empty heart. He stopped, turning to face her. Thank you for saying yes. In the golden light of late afternoon, with their son between them and the fruits of their shared vision spread before them, Penelope stood on tiptoe to kiss her husband. Thank you for asking. They continued toward home, where dinner waited and the evening's adult literacy class would soon gather. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, lessons to teach, a ranch to manage, a child to nurture, but they would face them together, partners in every sense of the word. Behind them, the schoolhouse stood as a testament to possibility, to what could be built when conviction met opportunity and love became the foundation for something larger than itself. What had begun as one man's offer and one woman's choice had grown into a community where education was valued, diversity was strength, and the future was limited only by the horizon. For Penelope and Austin Everly, that horizon stretched endlessly before them, bright with promise and rich with purpose, a love story written not just in words and kisses but in timber and nails, in lessons taught and lives changed, in a legacy that would endure long after they were gone.